And welcome everybody to that 401k virtual bunch. Ari Rosenbaum here. Oh yeah, look. Thank you for that cheap plug. Um,
Riveting. Can't let
yeah,
it go.
thank you. I'm just hopeful Gal Gadot doesn't sue me. Um, that 401k virtual bunch. Let's talk about in 2 weeks. We got Scott Tanker is going to be our guest. On May the 10th, I got Jamie Raskin, Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland. On April the 9th, we got that 401k conference number 10. That's going to be virtual, that 401k virtual conference number 10. On September 10th, we will be live in St. Louis, Missouri. I hope we will be live at Busch Stadium for that 401k conference live, the first one since Disney. And then September 29th in Houston, Texas. September 10th, I know Napa's the 12th to the 14th, so we're not going to go head to head, thankfully. But thank you, Jeff Todd, for being our guest today. Jeff, how'd you start in this 401k plan business?
Oh, well, I'm coming close on my 30th year. I actually started with the firm in Detroit, spent almost 14 years there that actually developed the managed target date solution that I represent today. 14 years.
So you started out in Detroit, right? Well,
Yeah.
that's why I'm wearing my Al Kaline jersey today.
Yeah, it's a nice looking shirt.
So when did you move out to Florida?
I moved out to Florida immediately. So I worked for the firm in Detroit, but I covered the state of Florida, and eventually I covered the Southeast, and then went from there to American Trust, who's still around. Bank. What happened there was the new FDIC insurance had them swinging axes all over the building. Was really surprised. 2008 was not a good time to become unemployed. In the industry, there was all kinds of people getting let go, and so sort of stayed out in the field there for 6 months, and then spent 6.5 years working for an ERISA attorney that was the TPA. That was a lot of fun working for her out of Alabama, and then went to work for Mr. Ritchie here at Vantage for a couple of years. Ended up selling too much, getting too close to my bonus, and moved on to my current position at Q3 Asset Management, where just passed my fourth year here. So almost 30 years in the business.
What are the big changes that you've seen over the last 30 years? I mean, obviously the technological change, and I mean.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started in the business, it was actually pre-pager, and then we all got pagers and calling cards. And, when you got a page, you didn't want to stop at the first gas station off the exit. You wanted to go down a couple of miles because there were just 2 or 3 other suits sitting at that payphone. So yeah, from pagers into the big brick phones. I know they got us all cell phones the first week that they came out, and you lugged around that 15-pound battery, and you didn't dare go over your 100 minutes because there's Billy. You didn't dare go over your 100 minutes because it was about $3 a minute after that. And then, of course, the internet and everything else that, came with technology.
Yeah, I remember the pager in college. Went to the, I was involved in student politics, so I needed a pager for some reason. Of course, the only place I used to sit at was in the basement of the student union, so I could never get a page. But going to the local price club to get a PageNet pager, it was like $100-something, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. But in terms of the advisory work has changed as well. I mean, people used to make it used to be a good living, as they say. Now I think you work harder and you make less money.
Yeah, and it's not just advisors, of course. It's us that still are pouring our heart and life into the industry. I mean, wages have been compressed there as well. Of course, the advisors have been compressed. There's a lot less people in the industry than there was 20 years ago. I know many of people that just went on to different fields. It got so frustrating to work in the financial services industry that they moved on to different things.
Yeah, I mean, in the consolidation, unfortunately, every time I see a merger, you always think about all the people that are going to lose their jobs. And then, like even doing the virtual conference, in January that we did. You work overtime with people who are, interested in sponsoring your conference, and all of a sudden there's a consolidation and they're laid off.
Right, right.
And
Well,
it changed. I mean, I've been in this business for 23 years. I've never increased the price of a planned document because, back then, 23 years ago, it took forever to do a planned document. You had the software, but then it had an interface with Microsoft Word. Now you do it on the web, and it sends. I don't even have to go to Staples anymore and get the copies done. I just send it out PDF and let them sign the planned document and send it back and all that stuff. So it's always interesting.
it is. It is. I mean, the e-signatures now and how readily accepted they are. Especially, I guess that really bloomed and blossomed during COVID. But I mean, you send a doc out, like your doc this morning. I sent it over to the advisor, and you countersigned it. The whole thing took less than 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what the technology has changed. So, what was it like growing up in Detroit, which is one of the places eventually we'll have a 401k conference?
Yeah, you need to go up there. It was interesting growing up. As I got older and got out of school, I realized it wasn't a place that I wanted to spend the rest of my life. I actually lived 45 minutes northeast of Detroit in a little Canadian border town on the U.S. side, so it was nice up there. But I mean, spent a lot of time in Detroit and watched it fall apart and come back and fall apart and come back. But I don't even visit up there anymore very much. The only person up there is my brother, and I make him come down here. When I get time off, I head to the mountains in North Carolina. My kids really enjoy it. Even into their 20s now, they still take time off, and we go up for 10 days every year.
So, Vantage benefits. You're wearing the shirt, you're wearing the cup. What kind of insight? Because I knew Jeff Ritchie. You know, did one thing for him, and all I could say is it took a long time for me to get paid. But outside of that, I just when you hear it, I think you're the one who might have told me the story, or when the story broke, I just couldn't believe it. But for those who don't know, yeah,
it was an interesting ride. I mean, you never had any suspicion that what he was doing was going on. I mean, it was a top-notch firm. I've met lifelong friends with that firm. One's on this call, but there was never any suspicion. Once in a while, the sales manager would have calls with the sales guys, and we'd bring it up. Where's this money coming from? Because when I came aboard, he had moved from Richardson, Texas, just 5 minutes away from Love Field, because he had, he always had to be showing people off, showing the office off. So it was close for people to fly in and fly out. So we shared the top floor with Southwest Airlines corporate headquarters. I mean, we had a huge office there, and they had just done all kinds of work to bring in, people, built a bunch of cubes for hiring expansion, and he pulled up roots and moved us to the 16th floor of the Renaissance building in downtown Dallas, where we occupied about 5% of the space. And he had over 40 employees there. But he had the best actuary I ever met in my business. He had on staff a risk attorney that was very knowledgeable. I mean, other than myself, I think he had the cream of the crop in the industry working for him, and nobody ever knew what was going on. What had happened with me is that, we had like $120 million goal, and I had sold a half dozen plans, and it became obvious that we were going to close, myself and the actuary, were going to close Florida's Natural, the big orange juice company down here, and that was an $80 million plan. So I was, with the 45 plans I had in the pipeline, it became, obvious that he was going to have to stroke that big 5-digit check. And sometimes you can sell too much in this industry. Of course, that was going to have to force him to go out and borrow another 100, and I forgot what it was, $160,000.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I guess when you're going to hit that bonus, it's kind of like the game of Survivor. You got this big target on you, and they're going to try to get you out before you have to divvy up that check.
Yeah, it was 3-4 times the bonus, or 3-4 times the amount that other record keepers that I work for at American Trust you had to get to hit your goal. And other record keepers that I knew. But I'm telling you, you know, he brought us in there, you know, every 6 to 8 weeks, and we did training. He sent us to every conference under the sun. We all dressed alike. You know, we had this one in a polo. We looked like, you know, well-groomed soldiers wherever we went. He would call you on a Monday and say, "What are you doing Wednesday?" And you'd be like, "Well, I have a well-needed office day." And he says, "Well, great, I'll get you tickets to Chicago. There's a conference up there. I need somebody to speak at it." I mean, it was crazy like that for almost 2 years. We sometimes worked on Saturdays, had conference calls on Saturdays.
So how long you were there?
Just shy of 2 years, just shy of 2 years.
And how long before you left, before the FBI came knocking?
22 months. 22 months.
Not like you're counting.
20, yeah, who's counting, right? 22
So,
months.
so you say were you surprised by it, or just, you know, the money had to, like you said, the money had to come from somewhere?
Yeah, I was surprised by it. You know, I never dreamt that it was happening to that magnitude. And, you know, we were always told when we asked about it by the sales manager, we never dared bring it up to him, that, you know, he had sold, he had ownership stake in Southwest Securities, and he had sold that stake and was, you know, had put aside $5 million, and, you know, he was going to spend it to get Vantage going. And when that 5 million was gone, he was going to reanalyze.
Is that the same? Wasn't that the company that he was barred by the SEC?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And I'll never forget when he hired me, I went up to the DoubleTree in Rocky Point. He was in town. He was going to meet with the DOL secretary. Perez was in town, and he had a meeting with him. And he said, "Well, you know, I need guys." He called me up there. We met for an hour and a half, and he hired me on the spot, and went to work right away. And again, there was never any inclination whatsoever that any of this, you know, taking money from other 401k plans was going on.
Yeah, I mean, his big deal was, you know, being a 316 and, advertising. And I know people that he met, you know, at conferences, and, you know, his big push was, you know, oh, if you hire 316, you know, you have no liability whatsoever, you know, the whole art of delegation. And then he was stealing money to cover his shortfalls.
Yeah, and he did it the right way. I can remember one year we were at his favorite conference, which was the Matrix conference up in Keystone. And the Pentegra guy came over and spent more time around our booth than he did his own, because he was just amazed at our process. He says, "You guys are really doing it right."
But, you know, I think when the story broke, I just, you know, it always brings me up to the Matt Hutchinson situation, because I replaced Matt Hutchinson on the map that he didn't steal from. And I'm always amazed by it, because at the end of the day, you know, I think you have better chances of putting a pantyhose on your head and robbing a bank
Yeah.
than getting away with being a fiduciary who steals millions of dollars. I just, you know, I think Jeff was 15 million bucks, I think.
Yeah, 15 million.
And
15 million. Go out and steal $15 million, Ari, and see how many years they put you in jail.
Well, his wife got more than he did, but I just find it interesting that you know, forget about the fact that it's illegal and it's wrong, but I always imagine people like, how do you think you're going to get away with it?
Yeah.
I mean, it only can last so long, and as a fiduciary, your fingerprints are right over it. Again, you steal from the bank, and you're disguised, nobody knows who you are. But when you're a fiduciary and you're stealing money, there are these trust statements that you can't fake. It's going to show that the money, you know, there's like an outflow. I'll never understand why, you know, somebody like that would do that and think they'd get away with it. And did he think he was going to make it up with revenue from his business and try to cover his shortfall that way? It's just, you know.
Yeah, we've sort of had this conversation offline. It's like borrowing from your kid's 529 plan. Your intention is to always put it back, but I don't know what his plan was for calculating the rate of return that needed to go back in there with the principal that he was taking. But, you know, there would be times that payroll would be a day or two late. You know, you'd go to, you know, check your bank account, it wasn't there, and you call up and they'd say it was a mistake. There was one year they were taking taxes out of our checks and they never submitted it to the IRS. I made a mess with your tax return. Hey, wait a minute. You're claiming all this, you know, white out on our W-2 forms. It was a mess.
Yeah, I remember my uncle years ago. He had a indoor amusement park in Jersey, and they went bankrupt. And there was a question on, withholdings that weren't made, and he had to pay up, to the IRS personally.
Right.
It's
Right.
amazing.
I was surprised he didn't get caught quicker, because I think oh, that was probably 2016 that happened. And there were other people that, had the same problem with their tax returns that worked advantage. The IRS is saying, wait a minute, there's a big problem with this return. He didn't pay any taxes this year. It's like, oh yeah, I got the form. It's attached to my return. Paid plenty of taxes.
So he would issue forged W-2, well, incorrect W-2s, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a one way that probably was part of the process that tripped him up, because the IRS's records are slow, but they move eventually.
Right. 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 I got to spend a lot of time in Dallas. I'm telling you, flying back and forth over the Gulf of Mexico from Florida to Dallas. It was, don't book anything, in 2 weeks. Everybody's going to be here. Don't book anything in a month, or here's the next time you're going to come. One of my favorite things is we went up there for a training, and one of the pieces that he gave everybody was a resignation letter to sign, because he wanted to see who was in. And then he called everybody after the morning session into his office and said, "What'd you do with that resignation letter?" And I told him I tore it up and put it in the trash. But he was an interesting guy, man. I mean, and despite what happened, he played a good game. He really played a good game. Again, you never had any idea what he was doing in the background.
What kind of good game it is if he's spending time in prison now?
Yeah, exactly. I would lay money. What has he got? 8 years. What is he going to get? A certain amount of percentage for good time? He will be a model prisoner, but I'd bet money that he resurfaces. We'll see him again somewhere, somehow in the industry.
Listen, I dealt with the Matt Hutchinson situation. You have if Matt Hutchinson, at least Jeff Ritchie pled guilty. Matt Hutchinson fought a tooth and nail, and he got 17 years in jail.
Yeah, for fighting it. Yeah,
for fighting it. And if you Google it, it's really, I mean, it's sad, but it's amusing. Well, it's more sad than anything else. Amusing in the sense that it's not realistic. He has, I think he has his son online, swearing up and down that his father's innocent. And,
right.
That they were framed by the Obama administration, and, conspiracy theory that just the reality of it was, I replaced Matt on a map, and I wrote something, marking Matt as being a good guy, whatever it was. But I from the get-go with Matt Hutchinson, I kind of knew something was up when the first time I met him. He said, "Oh, I'm being considered as the next Secretary of Labor." I'm like, I should have, at that point, I should have said, you're full of it, and walked away. But it was just so strange how it unraveled, and it unraveled quickly, because at the end of the day, when people are asking for their money, you can only buy so much time.
Yeah, and that personality that you just mentioned, Richie had to constantly be showing off with some high dollar guest in the office while we were there. At the last Matrix conference, he had Daniel Levin with him. And I'm like, well, when did you start working for Richie? Because I know him, And he said, no, he just asked me to come, but he was parading him around like a show dog,
So what are you doing now for Q3 Asset Management?
Well, for Q3, it's more of a consulting. We've built a record keeping tool. My advisors give me a fee disclosure. I show them what the plan is currently paying, and then we run it through. I think we're up to 20 some, 30 some record keepers in our tool, and we show them the 4 lowest cost record keepers at that parameter. And then we do the FI 360. We can customize the proposal for them, but it's pretty much consulting. And I'll tell you, a good target to go after now are the payroll companies. Used to be the insurance companies were pretty decent. But we spreadsheeted a payroll plan the other day. 5.14% was what we could find with the expenses. 5.14. I don't.
That's crazy. I mean,
It's one of the big two. I won't mention who it is, but yeah, the doctor was a little bit shocked.
yeah, and they're not even doing a good job for 5%, but 5% 20 years ago was a lot of money. I mean, no.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure if we had the technology that we had, 15 years ago. Oh yeah, I spent 1,000 business days in Puerto Rico and built a good market up out there with the consulting model. And you'd hear the advisor saying, "Yeah, I'd take 4% up front and 2% trail." It's like, oh my gosh, 4% up front, 200 years.
Listen, I remember the advisor I knew in Long Island was making 100 bips, and probably still to this day is making 100 bips. It's surprising somehow, how people. To me, 100 bips on a participant-directed 401k plan is, I wouldn't say it's criminal, but it's.
Well, unless it's awful small and you're doing a lot of work. When I worked for the ERISA attorney and the DOL landed in Birmingham to do field audits that tied her up for almost 6 months. She would go to dinner with the guys sometimes after she got to know them. It was a small group. I forget if it was 9 or 12 DOL field auditors. And the guy told her one day in the elevator that they were going to bring levelized comp to a plan. And she told her, "Oh, really?" She said, "Let me draw you two scenarios. You got a $1.5 million law firm that's 6 blocks from your office, and they won't let you in there once a year to do a review. And then you got a family-owned lumber company in Alabama that has 6 locations throughout the state, and they want you in there twice a year. You're going to charge the same amount of comp for both plans?" It's a great point.
Yeah, but you're dealing with auditors who never, sold the 401k plan.
Yeah. And, as through the years, there's some plans require a lot of hands-on and some plans, don't require much. So,
which is why I always feel like, the two payroll companies are just such an ill fit in the 401k plan business, because I think that, you're dealing with people who are not sophisticated when it comes to 401k sponsorship. And then, they're given a TPA that does absolutely nothing for them.
Yeah, and I've literally heard him say that the retirement plan is free. Not recently, but over the years, I've sat with them, and they would tell the plan sponsor that, "Hey, do the payroll with us, and the retirement plan is free."
Well, you don't have that conversation that much as much as you do like you did, 10 years ago.
Right.
When, pre-fee disclosure and people swore up and down it was free.
Yeah, that was interesting. At first the 404A5 was a much better fee disclosure, but that's become so convoluted now. We prefer the 408B2 to do benchmarking.
Well, I've always felt that the fee disclosures were always. I really felt the Department of Labor dropped the ball by not coming out with a standardized form. I mean, to me, one of the beauties of, I'm on one of these diets. I'm trying to lose the COVID-20, and I'm down like 13, 14. But food labeling, everything's standardized. This is the serving size. This is the calories. This is how much percentage and all that. And I just wish the DOL came out with a standardized form for fee disclosure, both on the 408B2 and the 404A5.
So I remember when the first ones came out. I was working for the ERISA attorney, and we had won regions and was doing a lot of work for regions. And those first fee disclosures came out, and you would look at the example. They used to have examples on the first 3 pages, and then you'd get into the fee disclosure and page back and try to get it to match up to the example, and it just didn't work. I mean, it was better to go through the legal agreement from the company and highlight every number that you saw, and then go back and read what those numbers represented. The fee disclosure was no help.
No, and that's why it's still, to this day, 9 years later, it's still sometimes a mystery as to exactly what is being charged and what is being paid, and what that. It's still a mystery because it's confusing language, and get an ERISA attorney to draft it, and they'll convolute it, and you'll have 5 or 6 different interpretations about what the true cost is.
Yeah, that fee disclosure that we went through with that payroll company was almost 100 pages.
That's almost as big as that book that my book that you're giving a cheap plug for. Yeah, maybe I'll sell a 13th copy. It's still available for sale on on Amazon.com.
Mine sits on my desk with my memorabilia.
Yeah, I was thinking about downsizing my memorabilia.
Where are the board games?
Well, that's the other room. This is the
Oh,
office.
okay.
My kids are on. They are have virtual school today, so they're around. So I can't have anybody drop by and all that stuff. All the board games that I don't use,
Right.
because I personally hate board games. But so what kind of advisors you work with? How many advisors that you work with?
Oh, it's hard to say. I got a couple of key accounts where, there's selling agreements that I got with mid-sized broker dealers, and so those are all my people. I actively work probably, my key advisors number is probably about 30 advisors that I work with, and it's been busy lately thanks to the new thing that we put together, the PEP.
Yeah, you can say what the new thing is. It's
Yeah, the PEP. I mean, it's interesting to me, Ari, that the main point of sale seems to be so far no startup costs. That a company wouldn't start a retirement plan for their employees because there's a $1,200 or $1,500 or $1,700 document. When you tell them there's no startup cost whatsoever, man, they jump hard and high.
No, I mean, we have a Yiddish word for it. We call them schnorrers, cheapskates. We have, I remember years ago, I was working with Potential. It's a very famous kosher food company. Now,
Mhm.
it's a food that, they're in a specific business where they dominate the market. And they talked about doing an ESOP, and they didn't want to do the ESOP because of what the appraisal would be, what the accountant would do.
Right.
The beauty of the ESOP was it was like a family of four cousins, and one of them wanted to get cashed out. So instead, what they do, they sold to private equity, and now the local sauce factory is closing. Who knows where they're going to move the factory to? But I'd be surprised how cheap people are, and they don't want to start up things. But setting up the PEP was kind of funny because it's one of those things where one of the few things where the Department of Labor did something and then provided no guidance until we were already there.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was February of last year that we started building it, and I kept calling you and looking for guidance from you, and there was none to get.
Well, yeah. Then the form came out to register as a pooled plan provider, like a couple of weeks before the deadline, and the beauty of it was no trust company and no custodian was like ready for it.
Well, and I was shocked. We started it with what.
Guys, I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to be rude, but I have to jump off the meeting. I got
No
a
problem.
meeting I got to run to. So
We're almost done. So
all right, no, I've really got to run. I got to get out of here at 4:30.
okay.
Thanks for coming, Steve-O.
All right, man. I will talk to y'all later. Ari, we'll definitely be in touch.
You got it.
Talk to you later. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So that pooled, Jeff, that pooled plan, that's a lot of fun to set up.
Yeah, it is, and I've had other record keepers say, hey, can you put one together for me? And I mean, I literally laughed. I said, no, you just don't throw them together like a swing set. There's a lot of steps and pieces with a PEP plan, and so we started with what quickly became known to be an incompetent record keeper. I don't even know where the referral came from. I do, but I'm not going to say. And then so we went to a real record keeper and put the thing together. It was still amazing. We're still, like yesterday I had to call you, we're still going through the process of things that need to be put in place for it. But I think it's going to be highly successful.
Well, you hope so. I mean, it's all about distribution, but it's just funny how the whole process. When dealing with people, sometimes there's some people who like to talk instead of doing, and it's always sometimes it's just a frustrating experience. When you're in control of everything, and you're not doing it, you could blame yourself. But when you're relying on other people, that's part of the problem. I mean, I had a project over a year ago that never took off because the person I was dealing with liked to talk but didn't like to do.
Well, I was really surprised. So, when we decided we were going to custody at one of the big open arc record keepers, that we were the first PEP plan. I mean, they didn't have any paperwork for a PEP plan. And here we are, what was it, towards the end of or the middle of February? We had to wait for them. There's a
No,
lot of waiting.
it's interesting, but other providers who were, a guy like Terry Powers, who's in the MEP space, it was, he's the control over there. It's easy for him to enter the PEP market because he could switch it right off. But when you're dependent on other, TPAs and other plan providers, it can get very, very hectic. But
Yes, as that MEP came up and grew and started growing, the ERISA attorney that I was working for said somebody's going to jail.
well, I already know 2 people that went to jail, so
Yeah.
Actually 3. But the other person I knew went to jail when I was working in Meyer Swazi. He came to me. It was a referral. It was his wife was a lawyer, and he owned a business that used to run Burger King and Dunkin' Donuts franchises in New York, and he had a defined benefit plan. So he says, "Oh, Department of Labor's after me. I haven't issued any 5500s for years." And I said, "Okay, where's the money?" He's like, "I spent it." I said, "What do you mean you spent it?" Well, I was redecorating my house. The business failed, and and I bring in my criminal law attorney in my firm, and we're talking to him, and this is a federal crime. They're onto you. Maybe come clean. You could probably avoid some jail time or, minimum jail time. And he just blew me off. And you knew he was going to get a divorce when the lawyer wife of his gets on the phone and he admits that he used the proceeds of the DB plan and put into their joint account.
Yeah. How about that?
All she's thinking about is she's going to lose her license and all that stuff. And needless to say, he ignored our advice. He got divorced and he went to jail. I couldn't help him with the divorce, but the jail thing he should have learned. And I think he served 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
Like I said, back to it's the stupidest crime you can do.
Yeah. It really, really is. I mean, I would think maybe Richie's in there writing some kind of book even, I mean, I can't imagine his personality, even in white collar jail, being confined and, I mean, and just waiting 2 years for the sentencing, his life must've been very, very interesting. It's
some people are born hustlers. And, I remember the guy who, John Spano, whatever, the guy who tried to buy the Islanders and he had no money. And he went to jail, and then he went out of jail. And then a couple more times he got picked up for the same type of crime. So
right.
We'll see what happens.
Right.
So
Right.
I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And we'll be back in 2 weeks with Scott Tanker, who's another good advisor buddy of mine. And we'll talk about his dad, Paul Tanker, and the founding of ASPA and all that other kind of stuff. And this will be up on YouTube soon. And go to that 4ksite.com for further information on all the events, including some live ones in September. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.